The grand palace on the distant planet of Aldor was silent, but inside the chambers of the alien princess, the air was thick with tension. The walls, made from shining silver stone, echoed the cries of a newborn. The alien princess, Queen Lyra, sat beside the crib, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She had tried everything: gentle rocking, soft lullabies, and even the finest healers of her kingdom. But nothing worked. The baby would not stop crying. Lyra was a powerful leader, loved and respected by her people, but today she felt helpless. The baby, her son, was the heir to her throne, and his constant crying was becoming a sign of weakness. Whispers began to spread throughout the palace. Is she fit to be a mother? Some wondered. Is this the future of our kingdom? Others feared the baby's constant crying could be a bad omen. Lyra tried to remain strong, but inside, she was beginning to doubt herself. The pressure of ruling a kingdom, combined with the responsibility of motherhood, was wearing her down. The cries of her son echoed in her ears like an endless storm in a quiet corner of the palace. A young human soldier named Jack sat in a meeting room, listening to the conversation. Jack had recently been stationed on Althra as part of a peacekeeping mission between the humans and the alien races. He had been trained to handle difficult situations, but nothing had prepared him for the news he had just heard. The princess's baby was crying nonstop. Everyone in the palace was growing more anxious, and no one seemed to know what to do. Jack, known for his calm and patient demeanor, felt a strange pull. He had never thought of himself as someone who could offer comfort to a royal, let alone an alien princess. But something about the situation stirred something inside him. Jack knew he had to help. Even if it seemed impossible, he approached his commanding officer, a seasoned diplomat named Captain Harris. "Sir, I've heard about the princess's troubles with her baby," Jack said. "I think I could help." Captain Harris raised an eyebrow. "You think a human soldier can help a royal alien with their child? This is not a simple task." "I know it's strange, sir," Jack said, his voice steady, "but I've always been good with children. Maybe my approach is different. I can try something." After a long pause, Captain Harris sighed. "Well, it's worth a shot, but don't expect any gratitude. The princess is under a lot of pressure." Jack nodded and made his way to the princess's chambers. When he arrived, he was greeted by her advisors, who seemed skeptical but agreed to let him try. The princess was sitting beside the crib, her face a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Her baby's cries filled the room. Jack said, bowing respectfully, "I know you must be tired of hearing the sound of your baby's cries, but I believe I can help." I returned to face him, her eyes filled with doubt. "Human? What can you do that all of my people have not already tried?" "I have no magic, Your Highness," Jack said with a calm smile, "but I know a few simple things. That might work. Sometimes a different approach is all it takes." The princess looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for something in his eyes. Then, with a soft sigh, she nodded. "Do what you must. If nothing else, I'll be grateful for a moment of peace." Jack moved toward the crib, where the baby was still crying loudly. He took a deep breath and gently picked the baby up. The princess watched him, unsure of what to expect. "She, little one," Jack whispered softly, rocking the baby gently in his arms. "It's okay. Everything's going to be fine." He spoke in a calm, soothing tone, letting his voice carry a sense of comfort. As he rocked the baby, he made soft, rhythmic sounds, similar to the sounds he had once heard on Earth, gentle, calming, and steady. At first, nothing happened. The baby continued to cry, but Jack didn't let it discourage him. He kept his movements slow and steady, his voice never faltering. Minutes passed, and just when Lyra was about to say something, the baby's cries began to soften. Slowly, the loud sobs turned into quiet whimpers, and then, finally, complete silence filled the room. Lyra stared in disbelief as her baby, who had not stopped crying for days, now lay in Jack's arms, fast asleep. She couldn't believe it. Double quotes, "How? ... How did you do that?" she whispered. Jack smiled gently. "Sometimes all it takes is a different perspective. On Earth, we have many ways to comfort children, and sometimes it's just about being calm, reassuring, and patient. Lyra's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time in days, she felt a wave of relief. She had been so consumed by the pressure of her duties that she had forgotten what it felt like to be truly calm. The human soldier had shown her that it was okay to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be present in the moment. Jack carefully placed the baby back in the crib, making sure he was comfortable before stepping back. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "I know this is a small thing, but I hope it helps." Lyra looked at him, her eyes softening. "It does more than you can know." As Jack turned to leave the room, Lyra watched him, feeling a mix of admiration and curiosity. She had not expected this human soldier to have such a profound effect on her life. But there was something about him, something that made her think that, perhaps, her people had much to learn from humans after all. The cries of the baby had stopped. But a new kind of quiet filled the room, a peace that had been missing for so long. It was a peace that Lyra had almost given up on finding, and now, for the first time, she felt that there might be hope for both her son and her kingdom. As Jack walked away, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He had only wanted to help, but in doing so, he had made a connection with someone from another world. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a much deeper bond, one that would change everything for both of them. The days following Jack's first visit to the princess's chambers were strange for both him and Queen Lyra. The baby's cries had stopped, and the peace in the palace had returned. But there was an unspoken tension between them. The princess, known for her strength and grace, had allowed a human soldier into her private world in a way no one had ever done before.
Jack, for his part, was unsure of how to continue helping.
He had no training in royal affairs, no knowledge of Althera's customs or its politics. All he knew was that the baby needed peace, and for that, he had to remain calm, patient, focused. The next morning, as the sun began to rise, Jack stood at the palace gates, unsure of what his next step should be. His usual military routine had been disrupted, and he had found himself pulled deeper into the world of Althera than he ever imagined. He was just a soldier, after all, a stranger to their ways. But something about the princess, something about her vulnerability and strength, made him want to help. It wasn't long before he was summoned again. Lyra's advisor, a tall, imposing alien named Ferris, appeared at the gates with a request. "The princess requests your presence," he said in his deep voice. "She wishes to see you again." Jack followed Ferris to the royal chambers. They walked through the vast halls. Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the palace's history. The walls were adorned with ancient symbols and tapestries, each one telling the story of Althera's past. It was a civilization that had existed for thousands of years. But here he was, a human soldier, standing in its heart. With the future of its monarchy in his hands, when they entered the princess's chambers, Lyra was sitting in front of the baby's crib, looking tired but calm. She smiled faintly when she saw Jack enter. "Thank you for coming," Lyra said, her voice soft and grateful. "I have been thinking about what you said the other day, about your perspective on things." Jack nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm just here to help, Your Highness." Lyra studied him for a moment, her violet eyes searching his face. "You have done more than help. You've given me a peace I didn't know I could find." "But I sense there's something more you want to say," Jack took a deep breath. "Your Highness, I think I can help in ways that go beyond the baby. See, the pressure you carry. I've noticed how much you struggle to balance being a mother and a queen. It's not easy. I know it isn't." Lyra looked away, her eyes clouded with unspoken emotions. "I am the leader of this kingdom. My people expect me to be perfect, and yet I can barely keep my child calm. What kind of ruler does that make me?" Her voice trembled, and Jack could see the weight of her doubts in her posture. She was so strong, yet in this moment, she was vulnerable, just like anyone else. "You're doing the best you can," Jack said gently.
"Oh, yeah."
"No one expects perfection. They expect you to be real. You're a mother, a queen, and a person. Sometimes it's okay to ask for help." Lyra shook her head, but her eyes softened. "I don't know how to let go. I don't know how to show my people that I can be both strong and fragile." Jack stepped closer to her, careful not to make her feel pressured. "You don't have to do everything alone," You don't have to hide your struggles. It's okay to show that you're human. Lyra's lips parted as though she wanted to say something, but she stopped herself. Instead, she turned her gaze to the crib, where her baby lay, still asleep. I've spent so much of my life hiding behind my strength, she admitted. I didn't want anyone to see my doubts, not even my closest advisors. But now, with my son, everything feels so different. I feel like I'm failing him. Jack knelt beside her, looking at the baby peacefully sleeping. You're not failing him. You're learning. We all learn. I think your son will grow up knowing the strength of a mother who cares deeply for him. That's what matters. Lyra nodded slowly, feeling a sense of peace begin to wash over her. She had spent so long holding on to her fears, but Jack's words were slowly breaking down the walls she had built around herself. It was difficult, but she was beginning to realize that maybe she didn't have to carry all the weight alone. I've always believed that being a leader means showing no weakness, Lyra confessed. But maybe the true strength of a leader is knowing when to lean on others. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for me to ask for help when I need it. Jack smiled. That's exactly it. For the next few hours, Jack stayed in the princess's chambers, helping her with small things. He wasn't a healer, and he wasn't a royal advisor, but he could listen. And sometimes, that was enough. As the day went on, Lyra's advisors started arriving one by one. They had heard of the changes in the palace, the calming of the baby, the peace that seemed to return to the halls, and they all wanted to know what had happened. Lyra stood before them, her posture straight and her expression regal, but there was a softness in her eyes that had not been there before. She glanced over at Jack, who had quietly retreated to the corner of the room, respecting her space. My son is well, she said to her advisors, her voice strong, and I am ready to lead our people with the strength I have always had. But with the help I now know I can accept? The advisors exchanged looks, surprised by her openness, but they said nothing. They had learned something in that moment. The princess was no longer just the cold, untouchable ruler they had once known. She was a leader who knew her own limits and was willing to ask for help. As the day went on, Lyra began to understand something she had never fully grasped before. She was not weak for asking for help. She was stronger for it. And with Jack's quiet presence by her side, she felt ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Jack, meanwhile, remained quietly in the background. He hadn't done anything grand or spectacular. He hadn't changed the fate of an empire or led a charge into battle. But in helping the princess with something as simple as calming a crying baby, he had unknowingly changed everything. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something much larger than either of them could have imagined. The days turned into weeks, and the quiet peace in the palace was a welcome change. For the first time in months, Lyra felt the weight of her responsibilities lift, if only a little. The baby's crying had become rare, thanks to Jack's visits. Each time he entered her chambers, he would calmly rock the child back to sleep, his presence bringing an unexpected sense of calm to the room. But as the days passed, something began to change between them. It wasn't just about the baby anymore. It wasn't just about the quiet moments where Jack would help with the child. There was something deeper, something neither of them had expected. Lyra had begun to trust him not just with her baby, but with herself. Jack had become more than a soldier in her eyes. He was someone she could rely on, someone who saw her not as a princess, but as a person. Someone who didn't judge her for her fears or doubts. And Jack, in turn, began to see the true person behind the crown. The princess, who seemed so distant and powerful, was, at her core, just a woman trying her best in a world that demanded perfection. One afternoon, as the sun shone brightly through the windows of the royal chambers, Jack arrived to find Lyra sitting alone at the table. Her baby was in his crib, sleeping peacefully. The room was quiet, save for the soft rustling of the wind outside. Jack knocked softly on the door before entering. Lyra looked up and gave him a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. She had been thinking a lot lately, and it was hard for her to put everything into words. Jack, she said, her voice softer than usual. Thank you for coming again. I've been thinking. Jack nodded, a little unsure of what she meant. Anything in particular, Your Highness? Lyra hesitated, her fingers gently tracing the rim of her cup. I've been thinking about what you said about strength. I realized, I've spent so much of my life hiding behind a mask of strength. But sometimes I wonder if I've been hiding from myself too. Jack stepped closer, his eyes filled with understanding. It's not easy being the leader of a kingdom, but you don't have to hide, Lyra. Not from me. I've seen who you are, what you're capable of, and I respect that. Lyra lowered her gaze, her voice trembling slightly. You make it sound so easy. I always thought that if I showed any weakness, I would lose everything. My people, my kingdom, my son. She paused, swallowing hard. But the truth is, I've been so scared. Scared that if I show any part of myself that isn't perfect, they'll see me as unworthy. Jack was silent for a moment. He understood what she was saying, even if he couldn't fully comprehend the weight of her position. He had grown up, in a world that had its own struggles, but nothing compared to the responsibility that rested on Lyra's shoulders. You're not unworthy, Jack said, his voice steady. You're more than capable. And the people who care about you will see that. It's not about perfection. It's about being real. That's what makes someone strong. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but there was none. Jack's words were simple, yet they rang with honesty. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe him. Thank you, she whispered, feeling a weight she didn't realize she had been carrying slowly. Lift off her shoulders. I've needed to hear that. Jack gave her a small, reassuring smile. You're welcome. For a moment, they simply stood there in silence, the only sound the faint rustle of the baby in his crib. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, but it felt like something had shifted between them. Over the next few days, their conversations continued. They talked about everything from their different worlds to the things they feared and hoped for. Lyra learned more about Jack's life on Earth, the challenges he had faced as a soldier, and the things that mattered most to him. And Jack learned about Lyra's upbringing, the expectations placed on her as a royal, and the sacrifices she had made for her people. With each passing conversation, they grew closer. Jack, who had once only been a soldier in her eyes, had become someone she trusted, someone she could talk to about anything. And Lyra, who had once seemed untouchable, had become someone Jack felt a deep connection to, someone he admired not just as a ruler, but as a person. One evening, as the two sat together, Lyra watched Jack as he gently rocked the baby to sleep. Her heart swelled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. Something warm, something new. Jack had brought peace to her life, not just by calming her son, but by showing her that she didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to be alone. As the baby fell asleep in his crib, Jack turned to her with a quiet smile. He's asleep. Again, it's becoming a routine now. Lyra smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in days. Yes, it is, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm also grateful for something else. What's that? Jack asked, his voice full of curiosity. Lyra took a deep breath before answering, her eyes meeting his. I'm grateful for you, for your kindness, your patience, and for seeing me not as a princess, but as a person. You've done more for me than you'll ever know. Jack was taken aback by her words. He hadn't expected such a response, but it made his chest swell with pride. I'm just doing what I can, but I'm glad it's helping. Lyra nodded. It is. More than you realize. The room fell into a comfortable silence, and for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt truly at peace. She wasn't alone anymore. And in Jack, she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. Someone who understood her. Someone who saw her for who she really was. Jack, for his part, had also found something unexpected. It wasn't just about helping the princess with her baby anymore. He'd come to care for her in ways he hadn't anticipated. And though he had never planned for any of this, he couldn't help but feel grateful that he had been there when she needed him the most. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, both of them felt hopeful. They had begun to build something real, something that went beyond duty and responsibility. It was a bond, one that neither of them had expected, but one that neither of them would trade for anything. And in that moment, as they sat side by side, Lyra and Jack knew that they had both changed. Their connection had transformed from one of simple need into something much deeper. The future, whatever it held, was no longer something to fear. The peaceful days in the palace were short-lived. Despite the calm that had settled over Lyra's chambers and the baby's improving health, there was a storm brewing just beyond the palace walls, tensions between Lyra's royal family and rival. Factions within the kingdom were reaching their peak. Word had spread about the princess's new ally, the human soldier named Jack, and the whispers were not kind. Some of the more conservative leaders saw the growing bond between Lyra and Jack as a threat. They viewed it as a sign of weakness. A human soldier, a foreigner, having such influence over their royal family. The thought of a human having access to the inner workings of the kingdom was unacceptable to many. One afternoon, as Jack walked through the palace courtyard, he overheard two palace guards talking in hushed voices. "Did you hear?" asked the other. "The princess has been seen confiding with that human. She even trusts him to calm the baby." "Unbelievable," the second guard replied, shaking his head. "It's one thing to let a human soldier help, but to trust him with her son, that's dangerous." Jack's heart sank as he overheard the conversation. He had grown fond of Lyra and had always acted with respect, but he hadn't anticipated how much his involvement would stir up such distrust. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Later that evening, Jack received an unexpected summons from Lyra. She wanted to meet him in her chambers, concerned about the growing tensions. Jack made his way to the royal quarters, where Lyra was waiting for him. She appeared calm on the outside, but Jack could see the concern in her eyes. "Jack," Lyra began, her voice steady but with an underlying tension. "I've received word that some of the royal advisors are unhappy about our growing relationship." Frowned, unsure of how to respond. "I never meant to cause any trouble. I only wanted to help." "I know that," Lyra said quickly. "But they see it differently. To them, a human soldier having access to the royal family is dangerous. They think it undermines my leadership." Jack's heart raced. Had never considered how others would view his connection with the princess. To him it was just a friendship, a bond born out of shared understanding and trust. But to those in power, it was something else entirely. "I don't want to cause trouble for you," Jack said, his voice filled with concern. "I've done nothing but try to help. But if my presence is putting you in danger, I can leave." Lyra shook her head, her expression firm. "No, Jack. You have done more for me than anyone else ever has. You've brought peace to my life, and I won't let anyone take that away. But I also need to protect you. The last thing I want is for you to be dragged into palace politics." The weight of her words hung in the air, and Jack understood. He had always known that his time on Althra was temporary, but he hadn't imagined it would be this complicated. He hadn't come here to become involved in royal conflicts, but now it seemed that he had no choice. "I'll stay by your side," Jack said after a long pause. "But I won't stand by and let them tear us apart. If they want to question me, they'll have to do it to my face." Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment she seemed to relax. "I'm glad to hear that. But there's something else I need to tell you. Advisors have demanded a public demonstration of my strength. They want me to show them that I can lead without outside influence, without your help." Jack was silent for a moment, processing the news. "And what does that mean for us?" "It means I need to make a choice," Lyra said quietly. "I can either give in to their demands and distance myself from you, or I can stand my ground and risk everything." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady. "Whatever you choose, Lyra, I'll be with you. But remember, this strength doesn't come from showing people that you're untouchable. It comes from showing them that you're willing to fight for what matters, and you don't have to do that alone." Lyra looked into Jack's eyes, searching for the sincerity she had come to trust. She knew deep down that he was right. But the choice she faced was not an easy one. Her people looked to her for guidance, and any sign of weakness could cost her everything. "I don't want to lose you," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with vulnerability. I don't want to lose my kingdom either. Jack smiled softly. You won't lose either, Lyra. You've already shown more strength than anyone here could ever understand. You just need to believe in yourself, like I believe in you. The tension in the room seemed to ease slightly as Lyra took a deep breath. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Maybe she could stand up to the pressures of her kingdom and still hold on to the things that mattered most. The next day, Lyra summoned her advisors for a meeting. Jack stood beside her, though he knew that his presence would cause an uproar. As the advisors filed into the room, the atmosphere grew tense. The whispers began almost immediately. This is unacceptable. One advisor exclaimed, pointing at Jack. The human soldier should not be allowed to stand in this room. Lyra raised a hand to silence the room. Enough, she said, her voice strong. Jack is not my enemy. He's helped me in ways no one else could, and it is because of him that my son sleeps peacefully. If you cannot accept that, then perhaps you do not understand what it truly means to lead. The room fell silent. The advisors exchanged uncertain glances, but no one spoke. Lyra's words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of leadership shift. She had made her choice. She wasn't going to hide from her people's expectations anymore. She was going to lead on her terms. As the meeting continued, Jack remained silent, watching Lyra with admiration. He had seen her grow from a frightened, unsure princess into a woman who was willing to fight for what was right. And in that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The days that followed Lyra's public stand were tense, filled with uncertainty. The political atmosphere in the palace had shifted. There were still whispers behind closed doors, and many of the royal advisors remained skeptical. But they were no longer openly challenging the princess. Lyra had made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences. Jack remained by her side as promised. He was always there when she needed him, whether it was to help with her son or simply to offer a listening ear. But as the days wore on, Jack began to sense that something was changing in Lyra. She seemed distant, her mind weighed down by an invisible burden. She had always been strong. But now there was a shadow in her eyes, one that hadn't been there before. One evening, as the sun set behind the towering spires of the palace, Lyra called Jack to her private chambers. The air was thick with the tension of the past few days. Jack entered the room to find her pacing nervously, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. "Lyra, what's wrong?" Jack asked, his voice filled with concern. "You've been quiet all day." She stopped pacing and turned to him, her face pale. "Jack, something's wrong with my son. He's not sleeping properly, and he's become weak. The healers have tried everything, but nothing seems to work. I don't know what's happening, and I'm scared." Jack's heart sank as he moved closer to her. Have they said what could be causing it? Lyra shook her head, her voice breaking. "I don't know. I think it's a sickness, but no one can explain it. And with everything going on, the last thing I need is for my son to be ill. I don't know if I can handle this." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out. You don't have to face this alone." But as the days went by, things didn't improve. The baby's condition worsened, and despite the best efforts of the royal healers, the cause remained a mystery. Lyra's anxiety grew with each passing hour, and she found herself retreating deeper into herself. She had always been strong, always been the ruler her people needed. But now she felt as though she was failing her son. One night, after the baby had fallen into a restless sleep, Lyra sat alone in the darkness of her chambers. She stared out of the window, lost in thought. Jack entered quietly, not wanting to disturb her. But she turned to him as soon as he stepped into the room. "Jack," she said softly, her voice strained with emotion. "What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I can't be both a mother and a ruler?" Jack crossed the room and sat beside her. He didn't say anything at first, simply offering her his silent support. He could see the pain in her eyes, the fear that she might not be able to handle the weight of both her responsibilities. "You are more than capable," Jack finally said, his voice firm but gentle.
Ow.
"You've already proven that you can lead your people, and you've already proven that you love your son. It's more than enough." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But what if it's not enough? What if I lose him? What if I lose everything? Jack shook his head. You won't lose him. We'll find out what's wrong. And even if things seem impossible right now, I'll be here. You won't face this alone. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, as though searching for some sort of sign. Slowly, she reached for his hand. Thank you, Jack, for everything. Next morning, Lyra called for the kingdom's greatest healer, a wise elder named Mavira, who had long served the royal family. Mavira arrived in the palace shortly after, her ancient eyes scanning the room as she approached Lyra and Jack. Highness, Mavira said with a bow, I've heard of your son's condition. I've come to help. Lyra nodded, her face drawn with worry. Please, Mavira, my son's condition is worsening. The healers cannot find the cause. I fear for him. Mavira approached the baby's crib, her hands glowing softly. With a gentle healing aura, she examined the child closely, her expression serious. This is no ordinary illness, Mavira said, her voice grave. There is something else at work here. The boy is strong, but there is an imbalance. Something inside him is not aligned. Jack stepped forward. What does that mean? What can we do? Mavira turned to face him. It means that your son's connection to the energy of the universe is being blocked. Something is interfering with his natural flow, but there is a way to fix it. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. How? Mavira's eyes softened. Boy needs the power of a bonded connection that is pure and untainted by fear. Only then will his energy be restored, and that bond must come from the one closest to him, his mother. Lyra's eyes widened. You mean I have to do something? Do. Must heal him with your own strength, Your Highness, Mavira said gently. You must show him your love and your trust. Only then will the blockage be removed. Lyra stared at the healer in shock. Could she really do this? Could she heal her son by relying on her own power? The idea was overwhelming, but she had no choice. She had to try. That night, as the baby lay in his crib, Lyra sat beside him. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, focusing on the deep love she felt for her child. She reached out, touching the baby's tiny hand with her own. Slowly, she began to channel her energy, drawing on the strength that had always been inside her, but that she had never fully acknowledged as she concentrated. A warm glow began to surround them, filling the room with a soft, calming light. For the first time in days, the baby's cries began to quiet. Slowly his body relaxed, and the tension that had gripped his small form melted away. Lyra's heart swelled with emotion as she felt the bond between them strengthen. And then, at last, her son's breathing slowed, becoming deep and steady. It was peaceful at last. Lyra looked up at Jack, her eyes shining with relief. He's okay. He's going to be okay. Jack smiled, his heart filled with joy for her. You did it, Lyra. You saved him. In that moment, Lyra realized something that she had never fully understood before. True strength didn't come from distance or control, it came from love. From the bond between a mother and her child, with Jack by her side, she knew she could face any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. The days following the healing of Lyra's son were filled with a sense of relief and joy. The baby's condition had improved dramatically, and for the first time in weeks, the palace was quiet not from fear or worry, but from the peaceful calm that had returned. The air was lighter, and so was Lyra's heart. She had faced her biggest fear and come out stronger for it as Lyra held her son in her arms. Watching him sleep peacefully, she felt a new strength within herself. She had saved him. She had done what no one else could do. And in that moment, she realized that perhaps she was more capable than she had ever known. Jack had been with her every step of the way, offering his support, his presence, and his calm. When she needed it most, the bond between them had grown deeper, and although neither of them had spoken about it directly, they both knew that they had become something more than just allies. They had become partners, trusting each other completely, no matter the challenges they faced. One evening, as the sky outside turned to shades of pink and gold, Jack sat with Lyra in her private chambers. The baby was asleep in his crib, his soft breathing filling the room with a quiet serenity. "Jack," Lyra said softly, her voice breaking the silence, "I want to thank you again for everything. You've been my rock through all of this." "Don't know what I would have done without you." Jack looked at her, his eyes full of warmth and understanding. "You don't have to thank me, Lyra. I was just doing what anyone would do. You've always had the strength inside. You just needed to see it." Lyra smiled, a gentle laugh escaping her lips. "I'm not sure I would have seen it without you, though. You've helped me find it." Jack reached across the table and took her hand in his touch gentle but firm. "I'm glad I could be there. You're not alone in this, Lyra. You never will be." For a moment they sat in silence, the only sound being the soft crackling of the fire in the corner. It was a moment of peace, one that neither of them had expected to find, but one they both knew they needed. Outside the window, the last light of day faded, and the stars began to appear. Lyra gazed out at the night sky, her thoughts drifting. She had faced so many trials in her life, but this was different. This was the first time she had truly felt like she could trust someone completely. It's not just as a ruler, but as a person. "That kingdom," Lyra said, breaking the silence. "I'm ready to face it. I'm ready to lead, Jack. I know what I need to do now." Jack turned to her, his expression serious. "You've already shown them what kind of leader you are. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Lyra." "I know," she said, her voice steady. "But there are still challenges ahead. I have to face the factions that don't trust me, and I have to show them that I'm strong enough to lead. It's not just for my son, but for the entire kingdom." Jack nodded. "You've got this, and I'll be by your side every step of the way." Lyra looked at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Jack, for everything. You've helped me become the leader I am today. I couldn't have done it without you." Jack smiled and stood up, walking over to the window to stand beside her. "You don't need me to lead, but I'm glad to be a part of it. You'll do great, Lyra. I have no doubt about that." As they stood together, gazing out at the stars, Lyra felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. She had always carried the weight of her kingdom alone, but now she realized that she didn't have to. She had someone to rely on, someone who believed in her, someone who trusted her, someone who had helped her find the strength to lead. That night, Lyra made a decision. She would no longer hide behind the mask of perfection. She would lead with her heart, with the love she felt for her people and her son. She would be the leader they needed, not just as a queen, but as a mother, a woman, and someone who had overcome the greatest challenges. The next morning, Lyra stood before the royal council, ready to address the kingdom. Jack stood beside her, his quiet support giving her strength. She had no fear as she looked out at the advisors and noble families who had once doubted her. She knew that she had already proven herself not through displays of power or strength, but through love and trust. "My people," Lyra began, her voice strong and clear, "I stand before you today not as a perfect ruler, but as your queen, someone who has learned the value of trust, love, and strength. I have faced challenges, and I know that there will be more ahead, but I promise you this, I will lead with everything I have. For my son, for my people, and for the future of Althora." Her words were met with silence, and for a moment she wondered if they would be received with doubt. But then, one by one, the advisors and leaders stood and bowed before her. The respect was undeniable. She had earned it not through political maneuvering or empty promises, but through the strength of her heart. As the council session ended, Lyra and Jack walked out of the chamber together. The palace was buzzing with the news of her speech, and whispers of admiration began to spread. Lyra's decision to trust herself, to show her vulnerability, had not only won her the respect of her people, but it also brought them closer together. "You did it," Jack said with a smile. "They're with you." Lyra looked at him, a smile of her own forming. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack." Jack gave her a small nod. "You did the hard part. I was just here to remind you of what you already knew." And with that, Lyra knew her path was clear. The future of Althora was bright, not because of her strength alone, but because of the bonds she had formed with her people, and with Jack. She was no longer alone. Together, they would face whatever challenges the galaxy had in store.